But right now, I want to introduce Laura McDermott. Laura is with the Cornell Cooperative Extension Eastern New York Commercial Horticulture Program. And Laura is right at the end, just about to retire. So this might be her last presentation before the official day. Although I hope that you'll stick around and keep working with us a little bit. But she is the berry specialist and the team leader for that team. She's done a tremendous amount of work for the industry and lives pretty locally. So Laura's going to tell us a little bit more about other unusual plants and then how to source plants. So where to get plants from nurseries and some of the resources available. So thanks for being with us. Laura.
Thank you, Anna, and I'm really happy to follow Danny. That was a wonderful presentation. We probably should have talked a little bit because I have a fair amount of overlap, but we'll go right past the stuff that we overlap and get into the sourcing. And I know I have recognized several people that have attended some of my trainings and Master Gardener trainings. So I hope that this isn't repetitive, but sometimes it takes a while, right? Let us sink in. And so we're just going to immerse ourselves in thinking about unusual fruit. And that picture up there, in case nobody knows, that's Amelanchier or Juneberry. They're delicious. And they are troublesome to some degree if you don't have the right soil, but I think that they're a great choice for unusual gardens. And for some reason, this isn't.
Oh, I might need to just click on this.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, great. So this is just trying to consider growing fruit at home. And I love the idea of the forest farm. The challenge for me is that my brain is still on landscape mode. And that is my problem. And it's something that I need help getting away from because it's hard to maintain a landscape. And so the forest farm gives you some freedom, allows you to explore, and is certainly more profitable from an edible perspective. So I totally am behind that. But they're beautiful plants and they're tasty, they're delicious, they're really good for you, super nutritious. There's all kinds of reasons to grow fruit crops, which is primarily what we're talking about. And I'm not going to talk as much about some of the tree fruits because I have a wealth of information for berry crops. But if you have questions about tree fruit, you're going to hear plenty of that today, and that'll get answered. I'm so glad that Danny mentioned the pollinator aspects of these plants because of the early bloom. Most of these plants, many of them are the earliest things that bloom in our landscape, which Danny covered. But they really help our native pollinators get established after a cold winter or a not so cold winter, depending. But they're really, really helpful. And some of this research is out there about some of the different bees that are actually capable of pollinating the species that you'll see. And if you are a bit bee phobic, I would try to really understand those pollinators as something that won't sting you so much as really help you. And it's a real challenge for some of our non-gardening community members. It is they want to kill everything. And it really requires a lot of education and understanding the importance of those pollinators. And so Danny's spent a good deal of time trying to help you understand the changes that we've seen. You know, when I first started 30 odd years ago, the USDA hardiness map hadn't changed in 4 decades. And it's changed 3 times since then, since I started. So we are undergoing a rapid change that does allow us to possibly grow some different things, but it also, there's a lot of challenges along with that we'll talk about real quickly. So some of the things that we want to talk about woody plants is that they have a real opportunity to help us store increase soil carbon, take carbon out of the atmosphere and store it in our soil, which is one of the ways that we're going to hopefully have a positive impact on changing climate. Planting perennial crops means increased vegetation cover. So that's a good thing. More biomass, more plant residues, all of that is very helpful. And then because those perennial crops could be woody fruit crops, that actually is really helpful and possibly even if you're going to use them for some kind of woody biomass or energy production. So if you were pruning and actually burning some of that for heat, you know, you do lose some of the carbon into the atmosphere, but hopefully there's like a balancing out. And certainly a lot of the legumes that Danny pointed out are very helpful as well. So the other reason for growing them, you already saw that these plants are beautiful. There's lots of different cultivated plants, lots of energy has gone in from the landscape sector, the gardening sector, the ornamental sector into different structures, different kind of leaf architecture, height of plants, you know, just the flower color, et cetera. And I know that there's a huge interest in native plants. And I, like Danny, am not a purist on native. I'm all over the place, but I understand that question and that focus. So we'll try to talk about that if we get a chance. So the other thing about this is some of us don't have an island, which I'm so envious of, because if you haven't ever been to Alexander, the Thousand Island area, it's absolutely one of the most beautiful places on the planet, I think. It's just gorgeous. But some of us don't have that, and we have just a lot. So there are ways that you can choose the plants that are appropriate to your size lot by just doing a little more research with different nurseries. There's miniature plants. There's things that are great for you know, just garden boxes or planter boxes that can be really helpful. So planning ahead. You're already doing that. You're trying to get some more information, matching plants to your site, no matter what your site is, trying to figure out that, your soil type, the space that you have, the amount of sun, et cetera. Starting small is really important because, as Danny mentioned, some of these things really require some effort to harvest. And if you don't harvest, you end up kind of creating some issues for yourself in the long run. So harvest is an important part of cultivating these plants. So starting small is kind of helping you ensure that you'll be able to be successful. And then preparing the soil, and there's going to be more information about soil preparation, soil evaluation here today. So again, the planning had Cornell and IPM have Cornell Cooperative Extension, and the New York State IPM program have so many resources available to you as you know, New York State residents. So one of the first things that I like to do when I think about putting a little or designing a garden is actually thinking about it, thinking about what plants would I love to have in there. So creating a plant list and go crazy. Now's your time to go crazy. Put it all down on paper about what you might theoretically love to see at the end of this. What are you thinking about? Creating that list helps you put the design together, and then it will help you actually source what you think you really need, and without getting kind of dissuaded into a different, going in a different direction. So choosing the plants, which is one part of creating that plant list, choosing things that are appropriate. So winter hardiness is really important. That's definitely a thing. And the challenge with us is that our hardiness zones, which I don't even think that's the accurate one up there, so don't look too closely at that. The hardiness zones are important, and that will really impact what the potential for those plants to make it through the winter is. But the other problems is bloom time. So depending upon where you are, your hardiness zone, if you have late spring frosts, or you have more than your fair share of surprise late spring frosts, early blooming plants may be a challenge. One of the examples I have is honeyberry. We have a big farm, very experienced farm, that put a fair amount of honeyberries through partially my encouragement. Put honeyberries in. They're located in Columbia County. Tried valiantly for a little over a decade and failed miserably because they bloomed really early and then they always got hit by a frost. They made it through the winter just fine, but because it's so warm there, they're blooming even earlier than normal and then invariably got hit by a frost. So just be aware of that. The other things, disease and insect pest susceptibility is, when we're talking about fruit, we're often talking about Malus, Prunus, Pyrus, pears, cherries, or stone fruits, and apples. They're really have a big pest complex. And we've done a lot of research in Cornell and across this nation in trying to figure out ways to circumvent those pests. But boy, if you don't want to deal with some of that, don't plant them, just for the heck of it. And then harvest date is important because sometimes, even if we do have a fairly good growing season, sometimes we'll get early frosts, although by and large, our seasons are extending on the late end of things. Our autumns have gotten much longer, which does open up our harvest season quite a bit. Plant longevity, some of these plants are not long-lived. The one person had a question about raspberries, and the size of the berries, more than the moisture, I worry about virus. So viruses get into caneberries and just decimate them. And if they've been in the ground for more than 7 to 12 years, oftentimes they will have had an insect vector virus come in there, and that can contribute to crumbly berry, small size berry. It's not your fault, nothing happened, but it's just nature running its course, and viruses are part of nature. So that is something that maybe could be replanted with a different variety or the same variety, but a new plant that might help you get larger berries. And then trellis needs, how much pressure do you have from birds, deer, etc. So it's just another example of a little raspberry cane thing in a planter that you could do. Some quick examples of trellising. I mean, some of you maybe your partner is like a frustrated woodworker. Yeah, you can get them out there, creating the trellises, do all of that, and you can grow them, and it really is helpful. So quickly too, one of the other things to consider when you're choosing plants and choosing your site is microclimates. And everyone understands, I think, if you're a gardener, about frost pocketing. Cold air settles. It can even be just a matter of inches, and those are the little cold spots, or it could be, right at the base of a hill. Be aware of where you site these plants, not just for winter injury, but mostly for those frost situations. So think about when cold air settles, it displaces warm air. The warm air is moving up the hill or out of that pocket. That actually on the side hill, that's why orchards often are put on side hills, is that air moves past them during that frost event and can actually be very, very helpful in trying to get these plants through that frost event safely. So kind of thinking about that, even placing things against a barricade. So say you've got a south facing side, you want to put your grapes right here, your building is here, it's a 2-story house. Sometimes that cold air can get jammed up against that house or hedgerow or what have you, and create a little artificial frost pocket right there. So just be aware of that to whatever degree you can. And sometimes it's very difficult to kind of manage out of that. So I'm going to go through this plant thing quickly, but I'm going to just go really fast, and I apologize for that, but I think most of it's been covered. There were just a couple of things, but we'll get to this. So these are the normal berry crops or crops that grapes, and all of these are wonderful. You can grow them, and there's lots of things growing, ribes and currants and gooseberries. I just wanted to mention this. For those of you who have property and are growing in the Catskill Mountains or the Adirondacks, you can still grow ribes. It's only the black currant that is the host for this white pine blister rust. However, if you're going to plant black currants, the DEC requires you to kind of just tell them. That's all you have to do, is tell them. And the reason being is that the resistance for some of these varieties that are truly resistant, but it's only one gene. So usually when a really good resistance has been developed by a plant, multiple gene resistance. And this is through traditional breeding too. This is not like artificial breeding or anything, GMO. But this is just so it's something that we're still considering, and other northeastern states have not quite gotten here. New Hampshire still has a prohibition on ribes. So it is something that is worth considering, worth understanding as educated gardeners, that is something you do have to let them know about. And there's some great varieties available. Yeah, there's just good varieties. Elderberry, as Anna knows, I complain about this plant bitterly because I love it so much, but it is, we are seeing a fair amount of challenges with growing elderberry, and who knows why. But that's again in larger plantings where people are trying to grow a fair amount of them. And whenever you put a monoculture, whether it's 50 plants or 5,000 acres, you draw in different pests. So that's the challenge with not having kind of the many species all together. But the wonderful thing about elderberries, it's been phenomenally beautiful. It has so many uses. This is another one too. Kiwi berry is on the invasive plant list. And I know that Ruby's probably saying, "Don't mention kiwi berry," because she's from down in the lower Hudson Valley, and they really don't like me to talk about this at those mentor gardener trainings, even though it's such a good fruit. But this is a plant that has escaped. And in certain situations, and when that happens, it can be very, very detrimental to the landscape. You go really crazy. If you're in the more northernly climb, I don't really think that's gonna happen, but who knows? So really be aware of this plant. It's an incredibly heavy vine. It needs the most robust trellising of anything. It ripens late in the season and can be stored for quite a while. And it's absolutely delicious. Does not have hairy skin. It's about the size of a walnut and it's smooth skin. But just be aware of that, leave a note in your will about what's to be done. Because it's a really tremendously difficult plant. And then Juneberries, Danny talked about them. I really, really like them, but they are problematic. There's some bush sour cherries. They're great. Cascap, I want to mention that on this Saturday, and I know I'm running out of time, so I'll just. Yes. This Saturday in Mexico, in Oswego County, there is an all-day honeyberry conference with the premier breeder and researcher from Saskatchewan that's coming to talk. So if you have an interest in honeyberries, I would try to, I have the registration link somewhere and I'll give it to you, but it's going to be a wonderful opportunity for those of you. The other thing, while I'm talking about this Saturday, because I don't have a picture of a chestnut tree, Red Tree Farms, which is a private organization, but is working with a lot of nonprofits. It's a nonprofit. They are trying to integrate chestnut growing into the Northeast, and they have an open house this Saturday, where they're talking about their projects, and they just are really, really compelling group. And that's beach plum, we talked about that, pawpaw, we talked about that. Yeah, this is a great plant, and chokeberry or aronia. I love this plant. I love the fact that she mentioned it because it is the most nutritious from a term of antioxidants and some of the vitamins that you can get from it. It is the most nutritious. Even the leaves, when dried and brewed in tea, are phenomenal. Best tea I've ever had. The juice is really, really great. So I think that's worth growing. It's a wonderful plant. Quince, also kind of problematic because it is related to the apple figs. They're not necessarily going to be growing up in the Thousand Islands, but a lot of you might be able to grow them in your gardens. There's nothing like a fresh fig, and you can move them. They're a small enough plant. You can keep them small enough that you can actually kind of move them in and out of a kind of a winter storage place, if you like, in a container. Persimmon, I think it was been covered. I went to graduate school in Florida, northern Florida. Persimmons are wonderful, wonderful. And mulberries, I think mulberries are underrated, and you can prune these to hedges or shrubs, so they aren't quite as messy as landscape trees. Everybody's like, oh, mulberries, yeah, but honestly, they're really delicious fruit. And so some of the cranberries, some of these vaccinium plants, which are related to blueberries, so they're acid lovers. Cranberries, and I think I have a picture of lingonberry. These all need very highly acidic soils. So those of you who are in the mountainous areas would be able to easily grow these. They're fabulous ground covers. They're really, really pretty. And this is one of the things that you don't have to worry so much about harvest, because a lot of times the rodents will get these before. Think about it, like that, you don't have to bother with harvest. This is an unusual, plant that is hardy, and if we have anybody from Asian descent, this is a very, prized medicinal and culinary, plant, Schisandra. And it is, we have a very large planting in Western Massachusetts that's been very successful for decades. So that is a great plant if you're interested in that. Sea berry, sea buckthorn, I personally love this plant. It is a pain in the tuchus because it is thorny and the berries don't come off easily. It's kind of like elderberry where you may have to freeze branches or freeze pieces in order to get the berries off easily. But it's a beautiful landscape plant from afar because it has this gorgeous orange color. And very high in vitamin C, really an interesting and nice plant. Goji berries we can definitely grow them. They are, everybody's heard about this is a superfruit as well. Goji berries tend to have these vining habit, so it does need to be trellised. And I have only eaten dried gojis. I've never eaten the fresh goji berries, so I don't know how that would be, but dried, they're very prevalent. And, this is something that a lot of our farmers are thinking about. How do we serve some of these ethnic markets? And because the transporting some of this material or the food products from China is so challenging. And one thing I know from working on a Chinese medicinal herb project years ago is that one of the challenges in Asia and certain parts of China is that they had, and I believe still are struggling with this, so much pollution and, heavy metals in their soil that they were trying to find places in the US to grow some of these crops, because they wanted to grow organically and they wanted to have things that were not going to uptake any of the metals or whatever. Kusa dogwood is a landscape plant that many of you may be familiar with. That's edible. Cornelian cherry as well. It's actually a dogwood, but cherry. Autumn olive. This is actually another one of those that is edible, but it's really a invasive plant, so you have to be very careful of that in certain areas. Buffalo berry, same. High bush cranberry, which is not a cranberry, it's a viburnum. So that is edible. When I talk to master gardeners, I'm like, I would not eat a high bush cranberry, but some people like it. And again, if you cook it, it may be just great. So I'm gonna quickly, with Anna's help, we're gonna move into the, and you may actually have to be my little guide if you don't mind, Anna. And we're gonna move to this. So this is a tool that Marvin Fritz, he's a faculty member at Cornell, and my former colleague Kathy Heidenreich put together, and then my other colleague Anya Osatuk is trying to maintain this. But this guide, it is focused on berry crops. However, many of the nurseries carry all kinds of fruit, so it's not just for berries. And this nursery guide allows you, and if you would scroll down a little bit, so you can choose the cultivar, and let's just do an example run through, because if you don't know about this, you really should. So let's go down and just look at, how about since we've been maligning it a bit, let's go to Juneberry, Saskatoon, and see where we can find these. Okay, so you click on the type. And it's going. And what it will do is go to a list of nurseries. I think eventually it will do that.
We sure hope so.
I should have put these in slides. I apologize for depending on the internet. Okay, here we go. Great. So jot down. So there's several different species, as you'll notice, and we spend a lot of time. I teach an online course in the Cornell Small Farms on these uncommon berry plants, and we talk about the differences between these different species. But let's say that we want to try to find martin. So we're going to go to, even though it says honeyberry, so obviously they are also selling honeyberries. So you go to that nursery, and then it will go to down to the nursery guide. And so it used to link directly, but I think we have something going on with that. So now you have to go down to Honeyberry USA, which is, that's a little glitchy thing. So here we have a link to their website, plus you have all their phone and everything that you need there. And then we can link right to the website. And it is going to say online sales or whatever they do at that farm. Some of them, I just want to, some of these nurseries are rather small. And so they have kind of wonky websites perhaps, or maybe they're doing more fruit sales than plant sales, but you'll know that right away. The beauty of this is that it allows you to rapidly compare availability, cost, all of that with just a couple of clicks. And I just think that this is one of the handiest things that doesn't get a lot of traction, unfortunately. So I try to tell people about it all the time. It is really a great tool. The other thing about finding these is when you have lesser known plants like this, when you're at a farmer's market, you have somebody selling fruit, talk to them. Go to them and say, where'd you buy those plants? Where'd you find them? Because sometimes they're actually propagating those plants because many of us, as they try to get this fruit off the ground and get people to recognize it as a delicious consumable, they are also trying to make some money on selling the plants, to try to get the ball rolling. And I know that there's a fellow, and of course, it's gonna just go right out of my head. He is in Jefferson County, I think he's a big honeyberry grower, but Dwayne Smith, he's yes, he does cold hardened grapes and he sells, but he sells plants. And he's a great wealth of knowledge. He's done a lot of lecturing for our small fruit stuff. So I really would encourage you to, when you see something weird, ask about it, taste it, try it, Okay, maybe not out in the wild, but if you're at a farmer's market, they are not trying to poison you. So it really makes it, it's a way to learn and it will help you understand whether or not you can try that in your own garden. But I think experimenting is really the way to go with this. And that's it.
So thank you very much for talking about that. We have a couple of minutes for questions. So if there are just like one or two questions in the room, and I see we have one on chat before we go to a break.
Oh, we have a spot where he and his dad planted green trees, pine trees for Christmas trees. Okay, and they've grown, now they're not useful. Do berries grow well in that soil or something?
So so this question is about siting plants under a balsam.
Getting rid of, if we actually cut them down, is that the soil that bears like something? Or what plants do?
It could like that soil. The problem is if the root mass is still there, a lot of times those Christmas trees, if you've ever dug them up, have very shallow roots as well. So you may be struggling for a little while, which is why I love Danny's suggestion to try to build that soil up and plant in that. So you wouldn't have to till, you wouldn't have to remove the roots, you could just put that bed right there. And that's my little thing, let me just stop that. I can't remember how to do it. Hold on.
Because if we're not disturbing the roots, we're keeping that fungi or.
Yeah. Yeah, you
They
could
like
definitely
down
do
there.
that, build it up a little bit and because berries have very shallow roots, so they don't need a lot, but they need enough. That's the thing.
Can I see one more question in the room? I saw a hand over here maybe. Okay, then there's one question on
Okay.
Zoom, and then I think we'll go to a break. Jody is asking, given that the white pine blister rust moves between ribes and white pines, would it be a very bad idea to plant golden currants? Another ribes.
Yes, so currants and all of the gooseberries, so all of the currants except black currants, all berries, not the alternate host. It is only black currant. And it is only black currant that are not immune or resistant. There are some varieties that are classified as immune, so they get a little bit. And some of them are totally resistant through that. So you could plant any other ribes and it would be fine. The other way to manage around this, just to, like, if you're worried if you've got white pine on your property and you really don't wanna make this worse, limb the white pines up. Limb them up, because the way the spores move is that they do have to kind of go up and they're not moving up as much as they're moving laterally. So that's also been found out in the research. So if you limb the white pines up more than you normally would, it will help a lot with managing that. Yes. That disease is called white pine blister rust. It was a huge problem for the lumber industry, the timber industry in the Northeast, back in the 40s or so.
And it's only white parts, doesn't get anything else, nothing else.
It hits white pine
Oh, but black currants.
is the alternate host.
That's
So,
the thing, yeah,
yes.
it's the alternate host, okay.
correct.